11 years being Chief Operating Officer in a 330-place special school in West London. For 8 years being a proud SRMA, helping schools to find some practical solutions to their problems. And I'm also proud to say I'm your representative on school funding in the UK, and I sit on the schools and academies funding group advisory group with the government. So today we have three fantastic SEND professionals with us, or education professionals that have a passion in SEND. I'll ask them each to just introduce themselves, starting with you, please, Pauline.
Hello everybody, I'm Pauline Aitchinson and I am Deputy Director of the charity Schools North East, which is a network of all schools in the North East of England. I'm really here with my NOS hat on, so NOS is the National Network of Special Schools for School Business Professionals, and we work with school business professionals in special schools, funnily enough, all over the country. My background is in school business management, and I worked a lot in SEND when I was doing that role.
Liz.
Okay. I'm Liz Smith, so I am in the special school as a school business manager. I'm part of a network that's not SEND specific. I'm part of quite a few actually. My background is in education, 23 years, 16 years in school leadership, and this is my 4th year specifically in the next SEND school. So I'm like a sponge and still learning everything that you're saying on this stage as well.
Yeah, I think we're always still learning. Thank you.
I am Benedict. I am Chief Financial Officer at the River Learning Trust. We have 31 schools, but the academic trust, largely based in Oxfordshire, and I lead on finance, data, community engagement, and partnerships. And I'm also I like to describe myself as an inclusion activist.
Inclusion activist, I like that. So today we've got half an hour, 26 minutes left now. So we're just going to go through some main themes, some of the problems within our SEND system at the moment, look at potentially what some of those solutions, both in this country and abroad, may be, and hopefully maybe also give you some practical tips. And we are going to have time for some questions at the end. But it would be remiss of us, given what happened yesterday, to not start with a brief reflection on our Chancellor's announcement yesterday. So Pauline, coming to you, what do you make of what was said yesterday in the budget?
Yes, so thank you. So when we were given the brief about the panel session today, I have spent a couple of days working on that and putting things together, and then of course we got that announcement in the budget yesterday, which I kind of felt changed things because we start to now see the direction, to shift from SEND funding to central government and taking it away from local authorities, a potentially, I don't know, historic moment, I guess, changing the whole system, the structural change. So I've been just on the train coming down, looking at some sort of pros and cons about that, trying to work out what we know and what we don't know. I think it, could be successful. Could be successful with that if it's transparent and it's a needs-based model. We definitely need to be looking at protective funding for special school and for mainstream. And without that, I think there's a risk of moving the problem just away from the local authorities and into central government. So I think that it brings that potential for national consistency. So one thing that we hear a lot in the special school sector is the lack of consistency with SEND funding. It is a postcode lottery, but sometimes that is within local authorities, not just neighbouring local authorities. So if this is being led by the government, then there's a chance that could be sorted. There is a risk, of course, to mainstream funding. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. If all the funding is coming from the same pot, you don't need to be a mathematician to realise there may not be enough money to go around. And the ORC is already predicting a real term fall. I think it was 4.9%. They were saying yesterday, mainstream funding, which is obviously quite worrying. We don't know what's going to happen with the deficit yet. Are they still going to sit with the councils, which I imagine would, and what is that going to look like? We don't know what's going to happen with other things like transport costs, therapies, speech and language, therapists. We know that there's a vision to bring health into education more, which I think is a good thing, but where's the funding going to come from? For that, sorry, I'm not going to keep on. I could keep going on. There's lots of things to think about. We've been given this
doubled in the last decade, and the outcomes are stagnating. So this morning we were talking about return on investment. It's quite poor. The system is not sustainable. Well, we know the attainment gap has increased for people with consent. It's almost 2 years now by the end of stage 4. Same pupils are twice as likely to be persistently absent and 5 times more likely to be permanently excluded. This is not acceptable. The system is really overwhelmed by demand and an over-reliance on ESCP. So there is a push for diagnostics seen as the primary gateway to access resources. And this reliance is highly costly, reactive, bureaucratic, and is taking the precious time of our specialists away from the front line. David Thomas, policy consultant, estimated the cost of processing the ACPs in local authorities at 5 billion. So if we could redirect that money to the front line, that would be great. And obviously this frustration is pushing parents to take their kids to tribunal, and it's also a very costly process. So this lack of funding is also impacting a teacher workload. The teachers have surveyed said about half of them feel prepared to teach children with autism. And there was a belief for a long time that SEND was going to be dealt with a separate group of people, teaching assistants or specialists, and not part of the core teaching. So we need to change that mindset. The system, as Pauline said, is financially unsustainable, 6.3 billion. It does not include the first 6,000 of notional schools, which hasn't increased at all in 10 years, and the cost of staffing has doubled during that time. So there is, as well as there is also a lack of clarity in terms of definition. What are the expectations? This leads to a significant variability of practices across schools, and the post-COVID category of support, as Pauline mentioned earlier, plus the lack of planning in terms of what places we need because of lack of data, overcrowded special schools, issues with transport because we are now relying on the independent sector. So, and at the same time as demand has rocketed, the local government funding has been cut in Oxfordshire, 57% cut in local government funding. So obviously we are often frustrated with our local authority, but we can't blame them because they have a statutory duty that they don't have the resources to meet what is expected of them.
So if I can come in the way you're saying that demand has skyrocketed and the investment too has gone up significantly. As a practitioner for 11 years, and you guys have been around as long, if not longer than I, you know, that money hasn't actually hit the front line. You know, my 11 years in my school, our funding has gone up twice. So the money is coming into the system, but is it being used effectively? Our system has problems. So there's, in your experience, what are the problems that you're experiencing on a sort of daily, weekly, annual basis at your school?
So, I'm in a one-track line for my lovely school. I don't have enough income to match the amount of expenditure we've got. I think everybody will register on and say, yeah, but that's the same for everybody. I think the time management around consultations and tribunals, who does that, how judges or local authorities place children in a setting that even though we're full, doesn't solve the problem that we're full, even though we know we need it. We're growing, we've gone from, in 5 years, from 60 to 90 to now reaching 61 in terms of pupil numbers, and now we're at 179. We're only supposed to go over by 10%, we're now 10% plus. But that impacts on spaces and then inclusion for everybody because we can't fit all the children to be able to access all the spaces that we've got, even though we've had the extra income for those children. It's not enough to provide the extra additional spaces. So we've got a whole, this is going to sound like we're great, we've got a whole the sound room, the swing room, the sensory garden, all these things, and now on a rota basis, and all the children can't access them to regulate or just to, because they've got a sensory need. It's now very much shared in a rota because our class sizes have increased from 10 to 14 in those cases. That's a real issue on the ground for us. And then I think we're very good at specialist staff in SEN practice. It's retainment is not enough, so we've got a lot of long-term good supply, which is really practical, to be honest, and a bit more expensive. And partnering with other schools that aren't SEN and doing outreach, and then backfilling our staff that we're sending out to do the outreach. Because there are a lot of schools that want to be able to provide in their mainstream school, but they can't if they've not got the training or the provision to be able to do so. And then I think the other main one for us is transport costs. So it's not our cost, it's local authority costs, but the impact of children being placed in settings that aren't close or in catchment means they might be on the bus for an hour and a half, 2 hours before they get to school. And then when they get home, those children fall asleep on the bus, they become sleeping, and when they go home, the sleep impacts on sleep. And our families have support sleep. Sleep okay, and the children have already had about 3 hours sleep in the day. So going to bed is now causing problems for the family. So we're kind of not helping them with that, if that makes sense.
So it's interesting to pick up on your comment. You don't have a problem with specialist staff. I think that is not the case everywhere, certainly not my experience. And I think that highlights one of the main things that's affecting the sector nationally is the inconsistency both in the way we funded it, in the way we operate, in the partnership arrangements and what have you. So looking, obviously there are across the sector more widely pockets of best practice and things that we can learn from other people. We've talked a lot today about OPEX. Benedict, I'm going to come to you. What do you think from the work you've been doing with the department around the lessons that could be learned from our own country and other best practice in the sector?
So there are really good models internationally, but also some good ones in England. So if we look at the European Agency of Special Needs and Inclusion, they distinguish two types of models. Because the input funding very much based on individualized funding, but their research is showing that this tends to lead to a more labeling, more bureaucratic and adversarial process. And in those countries that are more inclusive from the outset, they've got what we call the throughput funding model, where you fund the institution more proactively, you fund the universal offer by design, and that tends to offer a greater budget stability. But obviously you need to find the right balance between the input and the throughput model, and you will always have a number of children who require more exceptional support. So if we look at the developed world, if I include the global south where they've got all the kind of issues around inclusion, but if you look at the developed world, so you've got some countries like Portugal, one of the best examples of an inclusive practice that kept some stability over time. They've closed the special schools, but they've used special schools in a more strategic way to provide outreach services, to use their expertise in the mainstream sector. 98% of the children with special needs are in mainstream education. So it all starts with the vision. What kind of values you have in your society? Do you really want to be inclusive? And it's also economically more advantageous to have everyone in a more unified system with a single set of governance structure, etc. So we are in the UK in terms of effective practices. What tends to work very well, what is very promising, is the cluster model, where you devolve a share of the funding of the ISBL to a group of schools, and it's enabling a much more peer support within a group of SENCOs. There are within each cluster of 8 to 10 schools. It has a problem-solving mindset, and the feedback we get from those SENCOs is really peer support and building competence. They don't feel alone. It's a much more equitable targeting. It doesn't require an ESTP. And it's really helpful in terms of managing the transition between primary and secondary, where you tend to have a big dropout. So 15 local authorities in England are developing or have developed this kind of model with fantastic feedback from SENCOs, from head teachers, and from the local authorities, and the goal from the families. So I think this model should really be evaluated properly and scaled up.
So Pauline, the work that the National Network of Special Schools does, which by the way, if any of you are in special and need that hive mind that somebody else was mentioning about the WhatsApp group, the National Network does it expertly for those of us that are in special also. So I just wondered if you have anything to add to that from what the experiences of your network?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's just really, really complex, isn't it? I think that's something we can all agree on. It's really complex. I'm glad that I'm not trying to sort it. But looking at what does work well in England and what works well internationally, it's where that sort of funding is predictable and responsibility is shared, that reduces conflict and children are supported earlier, which makes a difference. I think we fund crisis in this country. I think that we try and make everything seem as bad as possible to attract more funding. It's kind of it's just the wrong approach to it. But I would also say, with the outcomes, I absolutely agree with those statistics that outcomes aren't improving for these children. But actually, what outcomes do we want for these children? You know, I don't think we actually know that. So what is an outcome for a child with SEND? If they all started to get a level X in English and maths, would we then all say, now we're very successful? I think it's a lot more complex than that. And I think it kind of needs to go back to that.
So to pick up the point you were saying about a shared problem, shared solutions, I was wondering, who do you think are the key people then that should be leading the change in our system today?
I think it's a really difficult one because it's so complex. I'm at school, I've got a little maintain, and I'm a co-facilitator who I'm very best friends with now because I need them to help me. But if are they the right people to lead your every individual school? I don't know, to be honest. The DFE, I don't know if that's a good idea. I'm not sure how that would work, but I don't feel I know enough about the ins and outs of how that would work and manage it. I think when you said points about clusters of teams being responsible for that provision overall, I'm quite liking that idea, whether that's at a local authority level or at a national level.
I think in a way it links to the inverted pyramid from the OPEX. ISBL's OPEX, you know, actually the bottom up or top down approach actually is it a hybrid? You know, because everyone's got a part to play. I'm conscious of time and I want to spend some time talking about evolution or revolution and whether our system is fit for purpose to hold our system to account, particularly in relation to our governance framework. I know we had an NJ rep just here a second ago, but particularly with governance and Ofsted, do you think that we are, you know, somebody earlier said, you know, you are what you measure. Are we measuring the right things in special? Are we defining success criteria using the right metrics? Pauline?
I mean, I just don't think we are. I think individual schools do really well as they know the progress that their children can make. I'm talking about special schools here where we're not talking about following the national curriculum, we're talking about pathways, and success in that looks very different to somebody in mainstream school. But I think that has to be looked at. I mean, that's just my opinion. I think we need to think about what success looks like. And we have to stop penalising schools who don't reach a very kind of set standard of outcomes that perhaps don't match the children in their schools. We know that Ofsted are looking at inclusion, but those meetings, those inspections are just starting now. What does that inclusion look like? I read something a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if anybody else saw this because I forgot to go back to it, where Ofsted were talking about asking schools to look at their group of looked after children, for example. You know, how inclusive are you for that group? Now, when I worked in school, you didn't always know who that group was. It wasn't something that was passed from school to school. You were relying on people to tell you that. So how can schools be measured on that when they don't necessarily know who those groups are? So I'm just not quite sure that we're there with the whole thing yet.
Well, never has 20 minutes evaporated so quickly. So evolution or revolution, what's your vote?
I think probably revolution. We need to just, you know, throw a bomb under it and then just kind of start again from that. A whole new, a very new approach.
But what that is, I don't know, a whole new approach.
Of course, revolution. I'm French. I don't think, personally, I don't think incremental reform is expecting this white paper. Once you have this vision, you need to clarify the definitions, to clarify what is expected in a mainstream school in terms of ordinary available provision. Then you need to give funding to schools, to give them the capacity to develop their workforce, and then once you've given the capacity and the infrastructure, etc., and the funding, then you can hold people to account. But it's always unfair to hold schools or local authorities to account when they don't have the means and to deliver what is required of them. So revolution, yeah.
Revolution, so clean sweep across the board for revolution. So if anyone from the DFE is here, we can have a talk about the place. So we have a few minutes for questions. So I'd like to open it up, please, to the floor. Yes, there's a question. Gavin. You got a mic? No? Do you want to project and I'll refresh it.
Given that you've got 8% schools, it's rare that you're going to have perfect alignment, probably with either map structures or local authority boundaries.
Well, I do believe in importance of place. For me, the same issue is a place issue. And you need to work with other schools within your locality, so it's group of 8 to 10 schools. And I appreciate the map and the size to facilitate this collaboration. But I think you need to look at it from children and family lens and look at your families and how they navigate through the system. So I do believe that so usually the local authorities in the system are seen. They tend to pay one of the centers to facilitate that cluster, 8 to 10 schools for 1 day a week. And they learn from each other, they work together. And they can deal with several cases at the same time when the cases are the same. They support each other, so they learn a lot from that process. And the parents are asked whether they are happy for their case to be discussed as well. So the parents are already on board on that journey. So from a professional development point of view, these models are brilliant. And they work within a finite budget as well, which is very important.
I think the sector though is in a very different place regionally, isn't it? And you know, the ability to collaborate in partnership is dependent upon trust, is dependent upon people knowing each other's organisations, and also is dependent on everyone coalescing around what is it we're trying to do and how we're going to get there.
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, up in the North East, we've got a really strong community across the whole of the North East, and schools work really, really well together. And I see how customers there would work well. I think you mentioned about trust. I think it's just really difficult because we've got a system. We've got 2 different types of schools in our system. We've got trust schools, and then we've got maintained schools. Thinking for special schools, a lot are still maintained, a lot of schools are still maintained. I don't know what the direction of travel is going to be with that, but I think it complicates things. And I think where you're bringing, I don't know how you put those clusters together. I think partnerships are brilliant. I think lots of people should be involved in those partnerships, including parents. But when it comes to education, possibly, dare I say it, that the schools maybe have more information than parents do about the best education for the child, because a parent is obviously very strongly linked to that child. I'm not saying the parents don't have a voice, absolutely not, but you know, how do you bring everybody together and they work for the child, for what is needed? I also think that there is a place in clusters or in areas, some areas, to look at schools and look at mainstream schools and see what SEND levels are like in each school. I'm not saying that this happens in the room, but we know that there are schools who would rather send pupils elsewhere than have them in their own schools. That's not inclusive. So how do we stop that? How do we just make a system that is funded for the needs of the child? Every child's need is taken into account, no matter where you are, no matter what kind of education there's no hierarchy in that.
I think we've just started to do that, but we're acting on our own rather than being directed to do that. We're waking up because a lot of maintained schools, through networking meetings or just chatting to people at various events, we're now starting to support mainstream schools in what we do in our provision, if you like, and what they can do or able to do, because they really want to do that, because they can't just get a special school place for a child because there aren't any. So what can they do? The children don't stop while somebody sorts that out. They've still got them, so we then now try to support what they can do in their current provision and how we help with that.
And I think that's brilliant, and I think that's where special schools can work. But do you get any support and funding for that?
No, it's pretty much just doing it, but we can't do that to then the detriment of our schools. And lose our staff out. I'm not going to send my dad's go off to go and sort someone else out and then we've not got them.
So when I was looking at international systems and what's worked elsewhere, one of the countries where it hasn't worked is Denmark. I don't know if anybody else knows much about Denmark, because this was just a small bit of research that I did. But in Denmark, they tried to push inclusion into mainstream. They did what it feels as if we're doing at the moment, but obviously we don't know until the white paper comes out. And it just didn't work. And the lesson, I've written down here, the lesson from that is simple. Inclusion used as a safety strategy does not work. And what you're doing there is just supporting inclusion, but it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So that is
like until this gets sorted out, this is what we can do.
And
kind of thing.
And special schools should be rewarded for that.
Yeah, I think just like people need, there's a range, isn't there? And therefore there needs to be a range of solutions in order to meet that need. Otherwise we're just shoehorning square pegs into round holes. I'm being given the signal, so we shall see if there's any other final quick questions that Sarah can tell me off for later. There is one more. Yes, please.
I work at a non-maintained special school at the National Association of Special Schools in Aitchinson about a month ago, which was the independent special schools and non-maintained schools. We spoke a lot about how we can collaborate more with the maintained special school sector. There doesn't appear to be many local authorities or many maintained school or academies reaching out to our sort of school. And we've got a lot of expertise, we've got a lot of resources that we can share. And sometimes that can be done without any cost, because the resources we can get from your schools as well. And I think maybe reach out to the independent sector a bit more.
Yeah, I think.
Do you mind repeating the question?
That was one question, I'm not repeating.
I think it's the system sector, the provision that we have at the moment is as it is, and there's things that we could learn from any different setting. The independent sector are part of our solution at the moment, particularly within very, very high needs residential settings. And I think that the system needs to look at all areas to see where the best practice is and somehow facilitate that good messaging getting out there and enable collaboration, because without that, I don't think we're going to get the traction we need. It shouldn't just be the DFE, it shouldn't just be local authorities, it shouldn't just be schools, it shouldn't just be parents and carers and pupils, it should be all of us. So I think there's lessons everywhere, and we should be open to where they come from. However, we are on out of time, and so thank you ever so much for your attention and questions. We're all around for a little while to come, so if you'd like to talk to us, please do, but enjoy the rest of your conference.